speaker series, mentoring, and networking sessions. And most importantly, creating a collaborative community of sharing and learning and equip everyone with essential digital skills to be successful in the future. A cordial welcome to the third edition of Women in Tech SheShares session. SheShares is a bi-weekly women-led platform where we invite women professionals in various fields of tech to share their journey with us, give us an insight into their field from a woman's perspective, and answer all of our burning questions. This is the third edition of its kind as a part of the SheShares series, and it's going to be all about data analytics. Now, on a quick side note, we are going to have a Q&A session at the end. If you have any questions during the session, please use Slido to submit your questions anonymously, and we can have them answered by our guest speakers. You can either scan this QR code or go to slido.com and enter the code 39372. You can also like other people's questions. The most liked questions will be answered first. I'll give you a moment to scan and join us at Slido. Okay. Let me now introduce you all to our esteemed panel of speakers. Our first speaker for the day is Purnima. She's a data specialist at Facebook. Purnima, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, everyone. I'm Purnima. I'm a data specialist at Facebook. I'm super excited to be here and happy to share more of my journey and the things I've learned along the way and some suggestions later during the session. Thank you for joining in.
Thank you for taking out time, Purnima. Our next speaker is Jing, who is a senior analyst at the Ministry of Home Affairs, Singapore. Jing, would you like to share something about yourself?
Hi, everyone. I'm Jing Chuan. I graduated from NUS with a major in sociology several years ago, and I picked up analytics. So I'm currently along the way, and I'm currently an analyst at the falls under the Ministry of Home Affairs. So a little bit different from our other two speakers, and you can see what differences we come up with later. Thanks. That's all.
Thank you, Jing. Thank you for joining us today. Our next speaker is Felicia. She's a senior consultant at Deloitte. Would you like to introduce yourself, Felicia?
Hi, everyone. This is Felicia. So I graduated from NTU 6 years ago with a bachelor degree in computer science. And I'm really excited to be here today to share some insights on data analytics and what we do in the consulting industry. So I hope I'll be able to share more later on.
Thank you so much for taking time off midweek, Felicia. I extend a hearty welcome to all three of our speakers. It's time to quickly move on to the presentations that our speakers have prepared for us. I now hand over to Purnima to talk more about a career in data analytics.
Awesome. Give me a quick second. I will finish my slide. Are you able to see my slide?
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you once again for joining the session. And during this session, I would be sharing more about my journey so far and hope to talk more about what I learned, which is more from a data mindset that would possibly equip you to a variety of data roles that you would see in the industry. But before that, let me get started about me. So basically, once I finished junior college, I was exploring options for university that is more from a business or computing or economics standpoint. And I was wondering which one would be better suited to put me in a good place for the years to come. And during that time, I fortunately had an experience where I was able to intern at a consulting firm called Savan Degrees, where I was learning more from a market research standpoint as a market and research analyst. There, I got exposed to the different ways in which data is being used from a consulting standpoint, and that was my first initial exposure to data. Back then, there wasn't so much awareness or materials around big data. And in fact, that year, I realized that NUS was starting a new degree program called Business Analytics. And through that, during the open house, I was able to understand more about what kind of skill set does a data person require in the years to come. And that fortunately drove me to join that course. During the course of 4 years, I definitely had really valuable experiences that enabled me to understand more about data. That includes opportunities to, understand more about marketing analyst in a local firm here called Happy Marketer. I also had the opportunity to go to overseas in Silicon Valley to intern at a firm and understand how data analytics is being used there. Also, some opportunity to understand more about, how entrepreneurship happens and how data is leveraged during that during my stint at Stanford. What this taught me actually is that a lot of things about data was more about how you perceive it, understand it, communicate it, things that you will learn more hands-on than on top of like your academic knowledge that you will be gaining. So something that I really picked up as an essential skill for someone who intends to work in data. Through that, I definitely had an opportunity to sort of dabble with other stuff like case consulting and stuff, where increasingly there were fields in which data was being used. And this definitely shaped my experience in data during my university time. And so I graduated with business analytics. And at that point, I was wondering what would be the good next step for me to really understand, like, the variety of roles that I was starting to see upcoming in data. And during that time, I was fortunate enough to have an opportunity to have a new grad position at Facebook. I was focusing more from a sales standpoint, trying to understand what are the opportunities for new products in emerging markets for advertising, and what are the upcoming markets? How do we size the impact of these products in these new markets? And I also then transitioned to a different type of role where data is again used from an integrity standpoint, fraud detection, etc. So as you can clearly see, it was like a journey of different types of domains as well as hands-on experience that helped me learn a lot more using data to get to the sort of mindset that I'm really happy to have gained through these experiences. Before I jump into the different kind of data roles or how do you, sort of kickstart a career in data, I just want to quickly explain on, in most cases, how do data initiatives takes place. So usually there is a first step, which is more from a data collection standpoint. That would usually be the first step before, starting to build anything. You need to understand what kind of data do you in, because at the end of the day, your analysis or your decisions are as good as the kind of data that you input into your whole system. Second, data storage, something that is becoming incredibly complex, at the same time easier in the new world where you're able to leverage big data solutions to store at the same time. Finding the most optimized way to store it is becoming like, an interesting topic in the recent times. And next up is to actually understand how do you use this data in a way where you can have from a raw format to a more user-friendly way where you can analyze from this data. That will be a third step. And the fourth step is usually the data analysis segment where you're able to, possibly develop metrics, build models, or statistical analysis, whichever that is more suited for your decision making. And after that, the communication of what you have learned is, again, one of the most key components when it comes to being in a data role, which is like visualization or your presentation. How are you presenting the data becomes a very key step. With all of this in place and done in the right way, then you can get into the decision-making segment, which is what most of your stakeholders are looking for. How are you leveraging the data to decision-making? And in this whole process, you would wonder, what sort of, who does what? What are the kind of different data roles that are involved here? Again, data is a super dynamic field. Different companies have different definitions in which a role is defined to doing any of these steps. But generally, you will see, data engineering being more from a data collection to a storage to transformation or your wrangling point of view. And the next step, you would see data analysts or data scientists more from analyzing the data through different statistical models or your machine learning models, or even developing metrics from this data that they are leveraging to possibly communicating it into a visualization standpoint. And lastly, you will also have a business analyst type of role, which also heavily involves data, but more from a standpoint of communicating the data to like actually driving the decision. But one key thing that you probably will have to notice that a lot of this has a lot of intersection between these different types of data roles. For example, a data engineer could also be involved slightly in the data analysis in suggesting on how this data can be leveraged. At the same time, a data analyst or a data scientist could also be building data pipelines from a raw data to kickstart their analysis. And it is always pretty good to be flexible and pick up skills that will help you dabble more from the spectrum. And lastly, a data scientist or a data analyst could also be involved in visualizing the data, communicating the results, sort of driving the decision making. And a business analyst could also, spend more time in the analysis and possibly driving the decision making from there. So these skills are pretty transferable, but it is always good to understand where in the spectrum does the different type of data skills fall under. Most importantly, whether you are a data engineer, analyst, scientist, or a business analyst in the spectrum, important thing to understand is the data mindset. How do you think from a data perspective? Before you jump into any data solution, because that is something that sometimes folks used to do where, we quickly jump into so what do we measure? Or what model do we create? The first step in this whole process should be, what is the objective of the initiative? What is it that they're trying to achieve? Second, how do you measure the success of this objective from a data standpoint? That is where your unique value proposition lies. And then once you realize that, hey, there's actually multiple drivers that can lead towards measuring the success of the objective, how do you prioritize your work down here? There's multiple ways to prioritize your work when it comes to data, but the few things that in which you can start looking into is from a MECE approach, which is identifying the distinct opportunities that would lead to your success instead of working on parallel work streams that end up giving the same result. This is one way to optimize your effort. The other one is the Pareto principle, which is more of also known as 80-20 rule, trying to find out this 80% of the work that you need, the 80% of the eventual impact that you can drive, with possibly the 20% of the effort, which is more like a prioritization. And lastly, figuring out which are the ways in which you can, sort of adjust the impact levers that will help you drive the initiative. And finally, what decision would be made from that, data initiative that you're working on? How will this influence the direction of the decision? All of this would lead you to providing really good value for any stakeholder that you're collaborating with from a data standpoint. And with that being said, what would help you prepare for a career in data? And again, these are suggestions and everyone's journey is pretty different, but a couple of points that you can start leveraging. First of all, exposure to data projects and internship, as I've said before, has, at least in my case, been super useful in preparing me for my next role, which is essentially finding the gap that you see in your experience. Possibly you're very good with data analysis. Maybe you need a little bit more exposure into data wrangling, data transformation, or vice versa. Finding the gap and making sure that an opportunity helps you to develop the skill set is a good way to think about it. Or finding one that kind of really showcases your strengths in a particular area where you're able to drive end-to-end effort from an internship or a project would possibly be a good one to sort of show your strength in it. Lastly, displaying passion for a particular space, whether it is social media, marketing, or transportation, any area where you see you have a strong passion in and you want to work in as a career, displaying like a data initiative that is part of this particular space could also lead you to the right direction. And these are the first ways that you can try it. Next thing is definitely technical skills. There's a huge spectrum of skill set that can help you, but first of all, I think fundamentally everyone needs to have the data mindset to make sure that you're driving value from the data to the decision making. And beyond just the programming languages required, I think data interpretation, meaning leveraging statistics to understand the data, to be able to inform your end user on what does this piece of data mean, again, is a very important skill set. Followed by data programming languages. And although most companies do not have a preference, when it comes to this, you can pick up either Python or R, and both of them have their own strengths. It also depends on your cost of learning for it. So if you're stronger with Python, make sure that you're able to understand and be able to switch between situations. And if you want to pick up new skill set, maybe from a statistical analysis standpoint, R could also be another language that you pick up. And one thing that a lot of aspiring data folks tend to do is that we focus a lot on programming languages. SQL is a very major component for anyone who is trying to have a career in data because it kind of fits into a lot of parts of it. So getting very strong at this would also help you in sort of like building up your career for data. Next is it is always good to know the big data storage and computation solutions out there where you can understand how the data flows through the ecosystem from the transportation all the way to your decision making. So exposure to this, at least as a first step, would definitely be a good to have. And finally, how do you use your network to identify data opportunities? Definitely, there is differences in data roles within different companies, and hence using your network to understand the difference would be super helpful so that you know what sort of roles to apply for and where are they available more. Especially if you're transitioning from other roles or industries, getting an example from someone who has done that would be super helpful. And then, mentorship and resources would be really good. We come to the last part, which is more in terms of, once you have had, a step into a data career, how can you possibly make a good impression during the first 180 days at work? Even though you might be a specialist from a data side, it is very important to understand the overall business or the product that you're supporting during your first 180 days to understand how the different products interact with each other, who are your end users, what is the priority of the company in terms of the business or the product would be very helpful in making sure that you're adding value. Next up is actually learning about the company's data ecosystem from the point of storage, transportation, analyzing tools, visualization tools to eventually, how do you communicate that? So understanding this will make sure that, at any point it may come, you're able to plug in and quickly start driving value for the company during the later days. And in a lot of cases, there could be documentations or trainings that you would require to be able to do this, but are not available. So in those cases, just pick up a sample project or maybe a small supporting task in an existing sort of project and start working on it, get your hands dirty, interact with the tools. That way you will be able to pick up things faster because you need exposure to a certain tool to be able to actually work on the data. And next up, the data is as good as actually the value that, you are able to drive from it. So setting some time with the cross-functional teams who would be leveraging your insights, who you would be building data initiatives for, it's very useful to understand how does your work interact with theirs. So during your early time to be able to get this exposure would be very beneficial in driving value for the company. The other part is, there are people in both ends of the spectrum where some people are scared to ask a lot of questions in the first 180 days, while some others like to ask and learn more. I would say, generally listen, just go into meetings, try to understand what people are talking about, read on previous documentation, posts or emails wherever you're able to, try to get exposure based on mentorship, and then ask the questions and do ask questions that you feel, would help you in understanding. And asking questions during these days would be really good in setting you up for success in the next few months to come. So do not forget that. Lastly, I think, this time frame is good in helping you understand the priorities and the interest areas of the company that, you are working for, and that way you can drive a lot more value. Thank you so much. This is the content. I hope it was beneficial. Please do share any questions or feedback that you have for me. I will pass it back to Shristi.
Thank you, Purnima. That was quite informative. Next, we have Jing, who will talk to us about the business aspect of data analytics. Over to you, Jing.
Thanks, Shrishti. Let me just open. Is it showing?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So again, hi everyone. I'm Jing Chuan, in case you just came in recently, and a little bit about my background first. I mentioned that I graduated from NUS in sociology several years ago. It's a very non-technical field, and I picked up analytics along the way through a specialist diploma at Nyan Polytechnic and several short courses paid for by my employer, and a lot of self-learning courses. So right now, I'm in a team in SPF, which specializes in data analytics and data science, but it's actually embedded within the business team. You can think of it as what Pumina explained, among the business analysts, and my team, a data science team embedded within that unit. I'm going to try to generalize as much as possible for everyone here, but do keep in mind that the business I'm involved in is essentially crime fighting, so it might be a little different from what you may or may not know. If you have any questions or want more specific examples, feel free to ask. If I can, I will answer it. Also, partly because of the way my team is structured, whenever some new technology comes up, we are basically asked to try, test, and review it. So my work isn't limited to just data analytics, but anything from project management to robotic process automation. If you have any questions about all those fields too, you can feel free to ask. I'm happy to help. On to the main topic. In case you didn't already know, domain expertise is one of the skills that is important for any of the data fields, including what Puminima mentioned. Those technical fields are very important, but the domain expertise, defined as the knowledge and understanding of a particular field, is also a very important area. The thing is, unlike the technical fields, it's one of the more vague terms that sometimes you think you understand, but you're not always able to pinpoint. I'm going to try to pick out a few areas where I think knowing the business helps you to be better at analytics. First, understanding the business helps you to define the business problem. Right now, we're in a climate where data analytics, data science, artificial intelligence is a very exciting field. The problem with that is that people start thinking that it's a magic wand and it can solve all their problems without understanding what is really behind these terms. The fact is, they may have a problem that they need solved, but they don't necessarily know how to articulate that problem. They may also have a very vague idea of what they want. Here, your domain knowledge helps you to figure out what the objective is and to drill down to the specific business problems. It's about asking the right questions based on your prior understanding of the business to define the requirements. It's also about ensuring that you and your clients have the same set of assumptions that drive your understanding of the problem. If you know the business, you also know generally what kind of data is available based on what is usually collected. Then, once you know what your business problem is, you can delve into what data you need, whether it's available, whether you can engineer it, and which data sets actually answers the questions you have. Sometimes, after questioning, I find that the problem that my clients actually have is in the data pipeline and not actually should be solved by the analysts. And I can forward it to the data engineers. Or my customers actually want automation rather than analytics. And those is more based on software engineering rather than the statistical side that powers the analytics. A lot of these things happen, and it's really important to tease out what you really need to do first before you do anything, so you don't waste your time and effort. Next, as a data analyst, you're going to have to communicate your findings to your stakeholders. This is where your business communication skills come in. Your stakeholders can be people of any level of technical skill, whether it's a chief data officer that you cannot just BS your way through, or the uncle approaching retirement who really doesn't care how you get to your conclusion. You might also have to present to people at any management level, your CEO who's did some data-driven insight to make a very strategic decision for the company. Or it could be a salesperson who just needs a very specific set of information that they can decide whether or not to follow up on. This means that you need to translate anything technical into very layman terms, but also be able to elaborate if they ask. Sometimes when my business users engage the more the people building some technical solution for us, like the data scientists or machine learning engineers, I sit in to translate the business between the business side and the technical side, and I realize these two groups really don't understand each other. So it's important to know the language of both sides so that you can talk to them whenever you need to. Knowing your stakeholders is also about knowing your organizational culture. For example, if your company has a data training roadmap that applies to everyone, you can assume that your audience will have a certain level of technical skill. However, if you're in a big company that's still developing a data-driven culture, more often than not, you'll find yourself being in a position where you have to be a data advocate. You have to be able to show that data analytics can fit into their current work processes without giving them added stress. One of the rules I follow for any data product that I do is to make things as simple as possible for my users. I call it idiot proofing, which includes very step-by-step instructions with screenshots. Whether or not they read it is another question. I still get people asking me why something doesn't work when they do things like change a column name. Okay, next one. As I mentioned earlier, I'm embedded within the business side. So being part of the business means that I'm exposed to business processes and pain points. This is very important because knowing how my end users do their jobs helps me to design solutions that don't give them the added stress, or sometimes just make little design accommodations that improve user experience. In these situations, a little goes a long way. Let's say I'm designing a dashboard, but my users find it a hassle to log into the server just to check a certain statistic every month. So in such a situation, I would design an email alert that sends a snapshot of the chart to my users. Or another example, if you know, say the data is entered by a temp staff into an Excel template and then uploaded into the database. If you've done data entry work before, you know how easy it is to make typo errors, especially when you're on a time crunch. And then some typos are very common. So if you know these errors exist, you can take steps to account for them in your data cleaning process. A lot of the pain points are really things that you don't realize until you're immersed in the business process. For example, one of the things that people hate is legacy systems. Sometimes these are just minor issues like, you have to write a lot of SQL to extract what you need. But it's still manageable because it's not something, because it doesn't have a lot of serious consequences. Other times, it can have more serious consequences when legacy systems come in. For example, last week, the news reported that the United Kingdom missed 16,000 coronavirus cases because they use an old Excel format. Their mistake was made by whoever designed the data architecture. But on our part as analysts, if you know your company uses a legacy system that can only accept this Excel format, then you can and should preempt these issues before you design your solution. This is my last slide. I'm not going to go into details, but here I'm just going to show tools that's specific to some niche areas of analytics. It's not necessary to know all of them, but if you do intend to go into an industry that specializes in such fields, it's good to know the tools for these fields. For example, for visual analytics, you have Tableau, Click, and Power BI. If you feel like doing geospatial analytics, like dealing with maps, we've got ArcGIS and QGIS. QGIS is open source, so you can play around with it as much as you want. for graph analytics, which is actually pretty fun actually, if you want to do network analysis, we have Neo4j, Gephi, and a whole host of other tools. So finally, thank you for your attention. And if you have questions, again, feel free to ask, and I'll try to answer whatever I can.
Thank you for sharing, Jing. It was quite insightful. We'll be having the Q&A session at the end. So if you have any doubts, please put your questions up at Slido. I now hand over to Felicia to talk to us about the new trends in the market.
Thank you, Shruti. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So thank you for inviting me to share my experience on data analytics. So before I cover what I have to share today, I would like to just first introduce myself to everyone here. So as I mentioned earlier, I actually graduated from NTU 6 years ago with a bachelor degree in computer science. And today I'm actually with Deloitte Consulting under the Analytics and Connective Practice for Southeast Asia. So throughout my consulting journey, I have helped many of my clients across different industries to transform their business by leveraging on the power of data and analytics to modernize their data landscape and also maximizing the value of their data into insights that provides real business outcome. So due to the nature of consulting work, I have been exposed to different roles in the client engagement. I started off as a data engineer where my primary role is to extract and process the raw data. And I work very closely with data scientists to support their machine learning use cases. I have also been on a role that is a data scientist where I work very closely with business stakeholders to understand their analysis needs and create visual stories through the use of visualization tool in the market. And recently, I have progressed to another stage as a data architect where my responsibility lies in the architectural design of the future data landscape to enable the data science capabilities that my client needs. So moving on to the topics that I'm going to share today, I will first start with what is connective technology and how has that impacted businesses today, followed by some of the key trends we have observed in the current business climate. And next, I will also talk about the potential roles and scope of work of an intern and analyst in the analytics industry. And lastly, for those of you who are keen in embarking in the data analytics space, what can you do to start and how do you actually build up the required knowledge? So what is connective technology and how are they used today? Connective technology is the product of artificial intelligence, and they can perform tasks which only humans used to be able to do. An example of that includes computer vision, which trains computers to interpret and understand the visual world using images and deep learning models so that machine can actually accurately identify and classify objects. So some of the application of computer vision include face recognition, where it is used in security surveillance to detect any unauthorized access in a highly restricted and secure environment. It is also used in the healthcare industry as a medical imaging used by doctors to help them to detect potential tumors or anomalies easily and quicker. And lastly, some of the, and also I think, as you know, NTU actually, research on self-driving cars, right? So this self-driving cars actually uses sensors to detect, to learn and detect traffic signals, road markings, and also detecting objects on the road in order to drive autonomously. So the other example of connective technology that I see today is robotic connective automation. It is an extension of robotics to perform repetitive tasks with the capability of simulating human thought process to automate learning, discovery, and making recommendations. An application of this kind of technology is usually used in e-commerce to drive, manage, and improve sales by applying cognitive analytics and monitoring customer behaviors to make any form of product recommendation. And the other cognitive technology is natural language processing, in short, NLP. It is a form of AI that extracts meaning from human language to make decisions based on the information. So let me just share with you an example of that. Have you ever shopped online and you had queries regarding your orders, or you have issues with your shipping and you want to actually look for a customer service officer that can help you immediately? So if you notice that platforms like Lazada, Shopee actually has a chatbot, and do you know that actually these chatbots, they are not an actual human, they are actually robots. So these customer service officers, right, they are actually algorithms that is using or adapting NLP to actually understand your queries and respond to your questions automatically and in real time. And the last example that I would like to share is on speech recognition. Speech recognition, right, is actually having computers to recognize the words and even the tone or emotion in a human speech. An example of that, which I think many of us are familiar with, is the virtual personal assistants on your phone, such as Siri and Google Assistant. That helps you to set alarms, remind your calendar events, and also helping you to call or text someone on behalf of you. So as you have seen in the previous slide on the application of cognitive technology, they are able to automate tasks that are considered perceptual, analytical, and decision-making, but not everything can be automated or worth automating. Tasks such as handling of ambiguity, using common sense, and getting along with people is just some of the things which AI is still not capable of doing today. So I'm sure many of you have seen articles on how robots or cognitive technologies are replacing jobs in the next decade. And you may wonder, is that really true? Am I really losing my job to a robot? Well, it's true to a degree, but it is also the case where they are taking away tasks from people who will be doing their jobs a little bit differently. So the question for organization would be to think about how can cognitive technology actually augment their workers rather than replacing them? How can we actually use or get both machine and humans to work together to combine their skill sets? So to do that, it will require jobs to be redesigned, or even it might even lead to re-engineering in some of their critical business processes. And having said that, doing that will still be more competitively advantageous than replacing human with machine entirely. So as we talk about machine learning and AI, it has led to many trends we have observed in the current business climate. The first on the list is actually data governance. So in short, data governance sets the policies, standards, and guidelines to help an organization to better manage their data and support the advancement in AI. Some of the key governance areas which organizations talk about today are data availability. They want to be able to ensure that the data is always accessible at a certain level of performance, and is the data clean, complete, usable, and reliable to train the machine learning models to produce an accurate result. And lastly, how do we protect these data against unauthorized use and preventing data loss? The second trend we have seen in organizations is that they are investing more in NLP technologies. So I'm rather fortunate that this year my team and I actually have been engaged by an agency who wants to learn more about their customer sentiments of their services through the extraction of their email correspondence with their customers, and also comments left by these customers on their social media platform. So to do that kind of sentiment analysis, we actually have to first prepare what we call training data set, where we teach the machine what is considered a positive or negative remark. The machine will learn and process each of these extracted data sources that I mentioned earlier to tag or classify these comments, whether is it a happy remark, a sad remark, are they annoyed or frustrated. So through this analysis, our client has learned which area they have done well and should continue to do so, and which are the areas that are that requires improvement so that they can perform service recovery and even improve their service excellence and operation efficiency over time. So the other trend that we have also seen is the need to build a data-driven culture in the organization. So in the past, a lot of executive management actually make decisions based on their experience and their intuition. However, with the technological advancement, it has made storing, processing, and analyzing data faster and cheaper, hence allowing the organization to embrace the use of data to actually capture and curate meaningful insights for decision making, and it actually allows transparent decision made within the organization. And last but not least, many large organizations have shifted from traditional data architecture based on relational enterprise data warehouse to big data or cloud platforms that allows them to process larger data volumes and variety of data formats such as audio logs, emails, and images that isn't something that a traditional data architecture can support. So we have seen this adoption of data modernization in a lot of our clients in financial services, telco, and public sector. And we are continuing to see this trend in other industries such as healthcare, oil and gas, and consumer industries. So I would like to just share a little bit on the potential scope of work for interns and analysts based on my experience in the consulting industry. So I would say the interns and analysts scope of work is pretty much the same. And as I've mentioned earlier, when you are in consulting, your experience is pretty much dependent on the kind of projects that you are staff on. So different people might have a different career journey. So typically, the analysts in Deloitte or in the analytics industry will work alongside with the experienced team members to work closely with business stakeholders to understand their business needs and their data requirements. They will also have the exposure to perform data wrangling, where we gather, identify, and transform raw data sets into a clean state for data exploration or training data for data science machine learning models. And the analysts will also assist the data architect or data engineering lead or even the data scientist to design and develop data models or pipelines using emerging technologies. And after developing these data models or pipelines, they will be involved in doing testing and doing production deployment. And finally, they are also exposed to showcase the analysis results or machine learning findings through the use of visualization and reports. So I guess Prima have shared a little bit insight on where you can start if you are keen in joining the data analytics industry. So I would like to just expand to that. So I think what you can do first is by learning how to code in Python or R, since those are the widely adopted industry standard data science language. And to do that, there are actually many online courses that you can find, such as Code Academy, DataCamp, Coursera, and even on LinkedIn. So these are usually free for beginner courses, but if you do need to pay, I believe some of these platforms actually provide courses at a discounted price for students. The other important aspect that you need to know is databases. So data is essentially the key asset that you need to work with. So you need to know how you can store them effectively, which tool should you use, and what's the difference between SQL and NoSQL? How do you process structured data and unstructured data? And if you are interested in the data analyst or data scientist role, it is also important to learn how to process the data and how to actually create a visual story using visualization and report to tell a story, basically. And as you all know, the technology space actually evolves very rapidly. Hence, I always recommend people to follow and engage in the data analytics community to learn what are the latest trends, learn from the new or modern ways of analytics from these experts, and contributing ideas and insights with the community will help you to learn from each other. And finally, what's the best way to learn, right? And that is to apply for data-related roles internship so that you can learn, you can actually learn on the job and practice what you have built and gain real industry experience. So that's all I have to share today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Felicia. That was quite insightful. We learned a lot. I hope it helped the others as well. We will now be moving on to our panel discussion. I hope you can see my screen. Yeah, so the questions are open to all three speakers. So my first question is, how did you realize that data analysis is the perfect job role for you? What interested you in this field? Felicia, would you like to go first?
Okay, so I think for me, I'm not really sure like how I realized that data analysis is actually the perfect role for me. I just kind of found that I have a keen interest or a passion in data when I was in university, where I have been exposed to artificial intelligence and machine learning, and also on databases. So that kind of sparked my interest in data, and I realized that there is a direction which I want to go for my career.
Okay. Purnima, how about you?
I think for me, it actually came through a couple of things. First, when I started working before university, and I saw that how data is being leveraged in multiple aspects, whether it is for the business side or the marketing or the development of the product. So I started realizing the power in which it can be utilized in the right way to influence, decision making, be able to direct a certain development. So that was interesting to me. And for me, data has always been a tool that you can leverage to reach a positive endpoint. And it's a very powerful tool. And that sort of made me interested to pursue this field.
Interesting. Jing, what are your thoughts on it?
So I've always been involved in data, just that it's different forms of analysis. At some point, I attended a talk on data analytics, and I realized it could improve the analysis process much more efficiently. And that's where I started digging up as much as I could on it.
Okay. So my next question is, most companies have a gender imbalance. So how is the gender ratio in your company and how does it affect your work? Purnima, would you like to go first?
Sure. So, I mean, I think gender imbalance, it is a real sort of challenge. And I think the first step is to acknowledge it. But definitely, I think there are a lot of initiatives that are being done specifically in the tech industry to improve this. So at least with Facebook, I do think that, there is a lot of initiatives in place to improve it. And I can definitely see it happening around me where both from a leadership or an individual contributor level that you're starting to see more and more females join certain sort of domains that potentially could have been new. And personally, how does it affect my work? It is always good to have a representation around you to sort of like maybe get a role model or to actually follow or just to have someone who has similar or opinion or sort of like understand where you're coming from sort of thing. So I think not having potentially a balanced gender ratio could contribute to like you feeling slightly singled out or or not heard enough. sort of feelings coming to you. So, but I think there are a lot of efforts, and the fact that there's a lot of initiatives and I can see there's positive changes around me definitely puts me in a better place at work. And I'm only optimistic about this. Yeah.
Okay. Jing, would you like to add something?
So for me, it's a little bit complicated because I'm in government sector, and it's one that's very unique in that most civilians are female. So that said, that means most of my business side is actually female, and the really technical people, most of them are male, or more the data scientists or the really IT people. But that said, we've been pushing for more people to develop their own skills. So since our base ratio among the civilians is female, it may not be exactly the same as in the private sector.
That's true. How are things in Deloitte, Felicia?
Well, so in Deloitte, I think it's pretty similar to Facebook, where we have a lot of initiatives that empowers women to grow and nurture. We have a lot of initiatives such as like women in consulting or women in tech, and in fact, my the analytics and connectivity management team, right, is actually a huge advocate for women in consulting and women in tech in general. And he has always, remind me that I, I am in a role where I can inspire more women to actually join the technology industry, and that really helps, and gives me a positive environment to learn and grow safely. And yeah, so how does that affect my work? I don't really think it actually affect me in any way. I remember how when I first joined Deloitte, analytics and quantitative practice actually just started 2 years ago or 3 years ago. And when I joined, I was pretty much like the first few employees in the practice. And I remember I was the only female on the team. And everyone has been, very nice to me, and they really helped me to grow and nurture. And we actually have this female senior manager in analytics and connectivity, and she's really an inspiration to me to remind me to, to feel empowered all the time, and to just have confidence in what I do. And that's all that is needed in order to succeed in your career. Yeah.
Great to know that companies are putting in efforts to change the balance. So my next question is, it's actually a quite long one. Which skills are required to become a data analyst, scientist, engineer? And is the preparation for interviews to all these three fields similar or different? And how can one prepare for their interviews? Would anyone like to call? Felicia, would you like to start?
Okay, so I think Prima has mentioned earlier in her presentation that, data analysts, scientists, and engineer essentially have very different role in the data environment or in the data space. So it's very important to learn, firstly, the distinction of the roles between these three different roles. And because of that, I think the preparation for interviews is actually quite different. But I think most importantly, you need to understand, for example, if you're looking for a data analyst role, you know that things that you need to do are, for example, creating stories of your data into insights, which will require you to have skill sets in visualization or in processing data. So in order to prepare for that, you need to be able to have you need to be able to show that you have those capabilities. And if you're interested in the data scientist role, then you probably need to look up a bit more on the different machine learning techniques that we have today, and be able to talk through those points. And if you're interested in the data engineering role, then what you need to know is how to actually process data, what are the different data storages that's available, how do you actually process different kind of data, such as like, structured or unstructured data.
Okay. Purnima, what are your thoughts on it?
I agree with a lot of differences in the preparation that Felicia mentioned. I think one more point I would want to add is that at least for a data scientist or a data analyst role, understanding of statistics, how do you interpret the data is very fundamental. I think sometimes when people are more focused on like the programming aspect or more like the machine learning or the artificial intelligence aspect, they tend to not give as much weightage to the statistics, probability understanding. And I think it is very fundamental to any sort of analysis roles. So having a good foundation in that would be very useful. And there are a lot of like free courses as well as like paid ones to get prepared for this. So I would definitely encourage folks preparing for interviews to invest in that. It would not only help the interviews, but also help them in being successful once they are into the role. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for sharing. Jing, would you like to add anything else?
I generally agree with what Purnima and Felicia said. Just to add on that you do need to prep like coding interviews, even though for all three, even if you're not even for data analysts, there are still certain coding skills that people will look at it, but it may not. The difference might be that they may not be purely say Python or R. It will depend on the role itself. For example, data analysts may need stronger skills in SQL. Data engineers may actually be using Java more than or C++ more than say Python. It really depends on the circumstances. But in general, the coding skills, well, it should still be possible to prep for, because based on whatever you've basically courses that you've attended, a lot of them do prepare you for this.
I hope everyone has taken note of all the valuable advice shared. Moving on to the next question. How important is math for for a data analyst, and what skills in math or CS are most necessary? How to approach learning data analysis? Purnima, would you like to begin?
Sure. Math is very fundamental for a data role. I think both, not just from a perspective of like, being able to like do computation, but really able to derive the value or understanding of what it means, whether it is like a statistical representation of it, or, how are you constructing a mathematical model for your machine learning algorithm, or in a way as how would you sort of transform a raw data into a particular format where data analysts can leverage. So I think math informs your problem solving, how you're logically constructing something. So I think math skills are very necessary. I think from a computer science side, at least for me, given that my degree itself was also a combination of different, I think computer science comes in more from a perspective of like, how are you able to sort of like, create data structures? How do you optimize when you're creating algorithms, and do it in the most efficient way? I think those are the aspects where you can borrow from computer science to be able to do your data work effectively. As for approach for learning data analysis, it comes with a lot of intention and practice, just like any other technical skills, where you need to be able to take a problem, try to understand the objective, deconstruct it, sort of come up with like ideas, and then apply different techniques, whether statistics, machine learning, or your ability to come up with like a potential database design, be able to do it hands on, and then sort of like implement it. one of the other things I found very useful for me was that, things like database, understanding of database or SQL, all this comes with hands-on experience. You need to have at least a decent access to like a large data sort of ecosystem to be able to really understand it and use it in the most efficient way. So internships or like actual data projects where you have access to like a large database or data records would be a better way to learn data analysis.
Okay. That was quite informative. Thank you, Purnima. Jing, would you like to add on something?
So since I didn't actually have the math or the computer science background when I started, I hesitate to say how important it is. I would say it is important, but it's not necessarily something that you cannot learn along the way. It takes a lot of work and passion, but and I agree with Punima when she says that there's a lot of that you do need in order to evaluate whether your model is working and how you interpret the data. But there's also a lot of tools that help you to do the actual calculation. So I would say the important thing is not to be afraid of the math, and but go deeper into concepts that, and make sure you understand how it works rather than having to calculate everything yourself. As for the computer science, there are a lot of packages that are already optimized. So unless you're coming up with something entirely new, you most likely shouldn't need to have that level of advanced programming skills. As for learning data analysis, I agree that it's really hands-on practice. Just find go to Kaggle, go to whatever data sources you can find and play around with the data. It really helps.
Okay. Felicia, do you have something to add on?
Yeah, so I think Purima and Jing have summarized this pretty well in terms of what are the skill sets in math or in computer science that you need. But I think what I would like to just add on is, how do you actually approach learning data? You can actually do that through a lot of online courses such as Coursera, DataCamp. They actually provide really comprehensive courses that allows you to practice some of these skills. And if you don't want to try on these kind of online courses, actually the alternative way which actually worked for me is to start a pet project. Think about what kind of case study or use cases that you want to solve. And there are actually a lot of open source or public data that you can use, and it's available online, which you can just tap on and just practice what you learn. Yeah. So that's just something that works for me, and I hope it can help other students to actually do the same and learn along the way. And in fact, if you have a pet project, actually what helps is that when you go for interviews, right, you can also talk about like the pet projects that you have done, focus a little bit more on, the reason why you do this pet project, what kind of outcomes that you are trying to achieve. I think that will help a lot. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Felicia. My next question is, how can students from non-CS background prepare to pursue a career in data analytics? Jing, would you like to have a take on this?
Okay. Well, firstly, as I said, it takes a lot of passion and hard work. I would say figure out how you learn best. For example, I'm not I don't learn best by purely e-learning. So I attended basically specialist. I did a specialist day at a polytechnic, and that forced me to devote time to learning. But at the same time, after that, I did pursue my own Coursera or EDX courses. That also helped in some areas where the other learning didn't prep me very well. So really, just go and find these. Figure out how you learn best. Then go and find the kind of courses, whether it's whether it's e-learning, whether it's paced, or whether it's a structured course, and go for them. Of course, you have to see your finances. So if your finances don't allow, other ways you can do is join a online course and get people to join with you. You can motivate each other to set the kind of timelines that you want to complete all these courses. Basically, these are these are basically things that you can do for as far as learning the math and the CS comes in. As for the others, it's back to practice. You do need to, as well, I think Felicia pointed out, you can do your own pet projects. You can also join hackathons. You can also do Kaggle competitions to prepare your just get the experience first. And yeah, essentially that's it.
Okay, thank you. Purnima, would you like to add something?
I think that data analytics is definitely a multidisciplinary field, and that's how even like university programs are also being designed. You would need a little bit of like computing knowledge, business knowledge, statistics, operations, multiple other soft skills that come under it to actually, that's where you can borrow those from, like more of like the arts side to actually be able to leverage this data and make a decision. So first of all, it is important to acknowledge that all the other skills are important to be successful in data analytics. And for non-CS students, then it would just be more about getting hands-on technical experience. And when I say hands-on, like I think being able to have a fundamental through like courses and stuff, but definitely being able to use it in an internship or a project to be able to display your effectiveness. It is very important. Also, at the end of the day, like more than anything, it's not about like whether you've done a course on it or a degree on it or something, but are you able to like showcase it through any way in your resume or during the interview, during technical rounds and stuff. So those are like more important.
Felicia, do you want to add something?
Yeah. So I think unlike the other presenters, I actually come from a CS background or an engineering background. So I guess where I can add on is probably based on what my colleagues have shared with me who are from non-CS background. You really have to have this passion in data analytics in order to stay focused and determined in learning, in constantly learning actually, because data analytics is actually a field that is ever evolving. It's evolving so quickly that sometimes it's really hard to catch up. So one way that actually worked for me is like what Dean have shared earlier on, which is to find people who have similar background or have like similar interest in data analytics to work with you on, let's say, like on online courses to motivate each other to continue on this journey. Yeah.
Okay. Let's move on to the next question. What projects can I have in my portfolio to impress recruiters? Felicia, would you like to go first?
Okay, so for the kind of projects, I think in consulting, as long as you show that you have a keen interest in data analytics and you have the necessary skill sets, it really doesn't matter, what kind of projects you have in your portfolio. They are just good to have, and it's just a plus point that shows to the recruiters or the interviewer that you do have a passionate interest in data analytics, and you will be able to grow in this field. Yeah.
Okay. Purnima, do you want to add something?
I think from my side, it is, for me, what has worked is actually showing or talking through like internship experiences where you have leveraged data to sort of like obtain that experience. Another thing that I tried during university, which might be useful, is that even if you are possibly in a final semester, and you're intending to do this, and you do not have time for internships or something like that, definitely working on a project during your as part of like your capstone or something would be useful. If not, there are research laboratories within universities where you can sort of like work on a project supporting like a research initiative. That also gives you hands-on experience, and a little bit of my machine learning experience comes from that. So I would say like you can leverage those opportunities as well. So in overall, anything that is more hands-on, something where you're able to talk about it from the start to end with complete understanding, are what like recruiters are interested in hearing more about. Yeah.
Jing, do you want to add your thoughts?
Okay, so I have a little bit of a different experience because I never actually interviewed for my position. I was basically, I had in the business role, and then I was plucked from there and dropped into this position because basically I showed that I was interested in analytics. I didn't actually have any projects, like major projects behind it. That said, I do agree that it's important for you to be able to show that you've done something, whether it's your capstone or if you have voluntary projects. There are actually a lot of people looking for people for help with their data science projects or analytics projects. It can help you to show to showcase your skill sets.
Okay. So could you recommend some good resources for learning more about data analytics and also for interview preparation? Purnima, would you like to add?
Sure. I think there are, definitely good courses in Coursera, EDX. Personally, even segmented as 4-week courses, or like if you realize that, hey, you're good at one particular thing, you just want to learn about something else, they have very specific courses on topics. That's a good starting point. From an interview preparation part, I would say there are a lot of blogs that are maintained by, data professionals in the field, as well as recruiters who are sharing both the soft skills and the technical skills. Generally, you tend to find them in like, even as a Medium article, or it could be blogs that people maintain. So it would be good to sort of like look for them. And I think they are in abundance if you sort of search for them. So I think those are ways in which you can do it. One other thing I would mention is that a good resource overall for this could be someone who has gone through this process. So mock interviews are very helpful, even with if it is with like a friend or like sort of a mentor. That would be super useful. So please include that as part of your interview preparation.
Okay, we'll do that. Felicia, would you like to share your thoughts?
Yeah, so I think I would like to just add on to what Prima shared. Maybe, interviewees can actually also research a little bit more about the organization that they are actually looking to interview with, to actually help them to understand, what is the culture or vision in this organization. That will really help to show that you are not only interested in data analytics, you are also passionate or really have a keen interest in joining this organization and have a similar vision.
Okay.
I agree with both Pumina and Felicia. For there's really not much more for me to add on for interview preparation, but as far as learning about data analytics is concerned, I do want to reiterate my point earlier that if you have specific niche areas that you want to go into, it's good to learn more about the tools that are available for them. That's it.
Okay. Thank you all for sharing. We now move on to our live Q&A session. So if you guys have still to put in your questions, here's the Slido link. And yes. So the most voted question is, what are some of the interview questions for the role of data analyst? Would anyone like to answer this?
I think I can share from a broad perspective. Definitely, this is specific to like different roles, but like for a data analyst, I think it is usually segmented into your understanding of a product. For example, they can give you a business context or a product context where something is going to be launched or some new plan is going to be rolled out. They will ask you to sort of like, come up with the success metrics for it. How would you sort of like, collect that data? Where would you log it? How would you compute or measure it, etc.? That could be one of them. There are cases other than that where maybe you are launching like a new feature. How are you going to set up like an experiment to sort of measure the lift? Who would be like your test group, control group, and what would be the sample size you should be looking at? These could be like some interview questions from a slightly technical standpoint. There will be a pure programming sort of like a segment to it that could be like on SQL, or you could also leverage Python or R to do that, where they will give you sometimes like two tables where different information is present there, but the primary key is same. You are able to connect it and sort of like answer a question, a very high level question of like how much revenue is there, or like something that is more of an aggregated form. Or it could be, if it is more slightly technical, they could ask you questions that is more on the lines of data structures and algorithms, where coming up with like a specific type of palindrome, or like certain questions that's very similar or found in the data structures and algorithm space. So that's more for the technical round. And almost all interviews will have like a behavioral round. And although it is not different for a data analyst versus like a product manager or some other sort of role, one thing that they'll probably look out for is that how are you sort of thinking about it from a data analyst perspective, in terms of collaboration, being an asset, and being a driving and a supporting function for a team. So these are the skills that they will look out for. Also, like ways in which you can structure.
Okay. Thank you. Let's move to the next question. Could you share the internship opportunities available at your prestigious firms? What do you look for in candidates? Would anyone like to answer this question? Felicia, would you like to answer this question?
Actually, I have Puvana, who is actually the recruiter from Deloitte. I'm not sure if she will be keen to actually answer this question instead.
Sure, Felicia, I can help out with that.
Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Pavana. So I'm actually the campus recruiter with Deloitte Consulting. So just to share some insights, so we are actively looking out for interns on an ongoing basis. As of this point, we don't have any immediate positions within analytics space in Singapore markets. We do have other markets, but that being said, there is a huge possibility that we might be opening up some roles in the next few weeks or even months. So please do keep a lookout for it. In terms of what we look for in our interns, because we are aware at internship stage you would not have much experience, right? So we basically do have a behavioral interview to understand more about what you've covered in school, what projects you have done, what do you enjoy doing generally. And then we take you through more of like a mini case or mini technical interview. And honestly, we are not looking for a right or wrong answer. What we're looking for is your structured thought process and how you approach things. Yeah, so that's some insight. Do keep a lookout on our career page for internship opportunities.
Thank you for sharing. Thank you for joining us today. Purnima, would you like to share about Facebook?
Sure. So generally, there is a time frame in which most of the opportunities for university recruitment kind of like begins. I am, from my understanding, we would probably be having like an event or sort of like a information session at least sometime in December that to start preparing for the next half. And there would possibly be certain roles that are spanning across the different teams that are present in APAC for Facebook. So I think do follow like the social media pages or LinkedIn or other forms where you can sort of keep yourself up to date with like information that is coming. And Facebook careers should be an area where you are able to like look and find any opportunities relevant as well.
Okay, thank you. I feel this question was answered in the panel discussion. What are some of the community platforms that we could join to learn from fellow data people? Jing, would you like to have a take on this question?
So I think there are several Facebook pages for different groups like Data Science SG, Data Kind SG, and there's also can't remember what it's called. Pi
Data?
Pi Data, yes. Yes, some of those, and a lot of them have Singapore chapters. So you can find them on Facebook, on I think Meetup as well, and Google is the Google community is also very active in doing in inviting people to give talks and for all sorts of on all sorts of topics. So really you can just look for them and since now that's all virtual, a lot of them are actually on their YouTube channels, for example, and you can just watch their videos.
Okay, thank you. The next question is for Felicia. Where did it go? Yeah. What do you mean by create visual stories out of the data? How would one do that?
Yeah, so what I meant by creating visual stories is when as a data analyst or a data scientist, right? What we do is we actually create insights based on the raw data, and they are usually in the form of like a data format that may not be in a form where business users can understand. So by creating these stories on a visualization, like I think Jean actually mentioned some of these tools during her session. It's like, for example, Tableau or Power BI. These are the tools that you can actually leverage on to create a story, a dashboard, or a report that helps to explain, the insights from this data and what are the findings that you find.
Okay. Thank you, Felicia. The next question is for Jing. This is the last question we'll be taking since we are out of time. How does one get into geospatial analytics? Is it anything like the analysis they do in USA regarding the political geography of every state?
Okay. Geospatial analytics is a very broad field. So yes, the political geospatial analytics that the US does is part of it, but it's not just that. If you want a structured course, the only one I know of in Singapore right now is the MSc in GIS, applied GIS at NUS, but it's really expensive. I'm not sure whether it's possible for everyone. That said, my supervisor actually went for that, and they found it very useful. So if you want to learn on your own, it's a little bit different because you do need to understand certain things about certain geospatial information systems concepts, which is not there are short courses for that. And I believe if you go to Esri, the website is called Esri, Esri Academy, which is the ArcGIS, which develops ArcGIS platforms. They do have some free introductory courses. If you are looking for more advanced advanced geospatial analytics, it's going to be a little bit harder. But within Singapore, SLA actually has this department that actually champions GIS and geospatial analytics. It's called GeoWorks SG, and you can check on their website. Sometimes they have information on how to start. Yeah, that's it from me. Thank you.
Thank you. This brings us to the end of the session, and I hope it was as fruitful for everyone as it was for me. Thank you once again to all the speakers for joining us. And before you leave, don't forget to connect with us, and we'll see you again next week for the next session of SheShares. Thank you all.
Thank you for
Thank you.
Oh, sorry. I just forgot about the photo taking session. Are the speakers still there?
Yes, we are still around.
Yes, we're still around.
I'm so sorry. We'll be having a quick photo taking session before we leave.